Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tiffany Mink. I am the marketing manager here at Interview Valet, and I am tuning in to you from the overcast Pacific Northwest this morning. Let us know over in the chat where you're tuning in from. We'd love to see where you guys are all watching from. We do have the chat over there, so please use that throughout today's presentation. I will be collecting all of your questions, and we're going to do a live Q&A at the end. So hang on to those, and we'll address all of your questions while we're here live today. I'm really excited about today's topic. It is our second most popular, most requested resource that we have here. And we're talking about how to promote and repurpose your podcast interviews as a guest. There is a corresponding report that goes along with this. It's a free download. If you don't have a copy of that, I will put a link for that over in the chat in just a second once we get started. And with that, I know we have a lot to cover today. This is a pretty a meaty topic that has a lot of information with it. So let's get started. I'm going to bring on our founder and Chief Evangelist Officer, Tom Schwab. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Tiffany. I am so excited for this first LinkedIn Live that we've done here of 2023. So many people are talking about how do you do more interviews? And I always bring back to them and say, what are you doing with your interviews now, right? If you want to get more results, do more from each and every interview. One of my phrase for this year is better is better, right? One of our clients, Steve Acho, taught me that. It's like more is not better, better is better. So we're going to show you today how to repurpose, how to promote so that you can get better results from every interview.
Right, exactly. Like you said, it's not about going on more and more interviews. You don't want to keep driving towards something if it's not producing the way that it should. So you should learn how to maximize that and optimize that before you continue and get your snowball going, right?
Yeah. And I know you're a Navy family, and I remember a phrase from the Navy we had. It's called doubling down on stupid. And if something's not working, if you're not getting the results, just doing more of it's not going to magically make it better, right? So this is one of those things that often we have clients that have been doing podcast guesting, and they're like, I'm not getting results. And there's a lot of things that could be missing, but one of them is that repurposing and promoting. We've done it before where we can get a month's worth of content from every podcast interview. So when people say, I want to do 100 interviews this month, it's like, no, just do better interviews and then repurpose them, promote them.
Exactly, because those 100 interviews are not going to serve you any good if they're just sitting on your desktop somewhere, right?
Exactly. If you just want massive exposure, get your picture put up in every post office in the United States, right? See how that works out for you.
Exactly. All right. Well, great. I know you have a lot to talk about and to cover, so let's dive in.
All right.
Okay.
So we'll try not doing death by PowerPoint here, but sometimes it's easier. And so this guide, Tiffany will put this in the chat. If you haven't accessed this guide, everything we talk about is in there. And there's also the last page has some of my favorite go-tos, the resources that we use, the tools that we use, the ones that we recommend. So some of you may know me, other ones may not. This could be your first one. I know we've got new people here. So who is Tom Schwab? I'm the founder, like Tiffany said, of Interview Valet. We've been going 9 years here. I'm an entrepreneur, a business owner, an author. I wrote the book, Podcast Guest Profits. Christopher Lochhead called it the Bible of podcast guesting. I don't know if that's a compliment or not, right? Did you like the original? But I'm also an engineer and a Navy veteran. And so you'll see a lot of the way my mind works is processes, systems, trying to get results, not just another interview. And, my first job out of college was running nuclear power plants. And some people will say, wow, that's amazing. And then they'll come back and say, well, my business is too complicated in order to systematize, or podcast interviews. There's so many variables. It's like, hey, if they can systematize nuclear power and have 20 somethings running that safely and reproducible, we can figure out podcast interview marketing. And so, some of this is going to come from my experience. I've been doing podcast interviews for over 10 years, 1,200 interviews, and probably more than 2 million listeners. And I love how some people say, well, in my experience. Well, that's good. That's one data point. But I think when you have more and more data points, that's when you can start making decisions. And that's one of the things that I'm very proud of, is that we are a people-driven company, but we make decisions on data, right? One of our clients, Greg Alexander, I love it how he says, in God we trust, everyone else bring data. And that's what we're bringing to you here. Data from over 9 years of over 1,500 clients on over 75,000 interviews. So bring that many personal opinions together, I think you'll be able to really take some actionable advice from this. And now some of the clients, are bigger clients, Fortune 500, love them because they have their data down. Other ones are smaller brands, coaches, consultants, a lot of nonfiction authors where they've got a new viewpoint that they're trying to get out there so that they can grow their business around it also. And then also, the best place to find podcast listeners is listening podcasts. So podcast interview marketing is a great strategy to either launch a podcast or launch it to the next level. And we've had the opportunity to work with some amazing podcasters. But before we jump into it, I want to challenge you with something here, right? Think about what you're doing now, and is it working? Is your thinking serving you or hurting you? I love how Christopher Lochhead says, thinking about thinking is the most important kind of thinking there is. We don't do that so often. There's another book out there called The Road Less Stupid by Cunningham. And I love how he says, think about a problem. Don't just don't act on it. Don't just say, oh, I got to get on bigger podcasts. I got to get on more podcasts, because there are myths that are hurting you with that. And I already mentioned one. There's 3 myths that I think is really, really hurting people in the results from podcast interviews. And remember, it's the results that we want, right? No customer has ever come to me and said, I just want to get on more podcasts, right? That's an ego thing, right? All right, it might feel good the first couple of times, but at the end of the day, this is marketing. And if it doesn't make sense, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense, right? So the first myth that hurts so many people is more is better, right? They'll try just doing more and more podcast interviews. Now, the industry is set up that most booking agencies, most connection agencies, they're charging by the booking, right? So they want you to do more and more and more. We're really looking at how can you get more results from everyone. And it almost becomes pathetic if you do too many, right? There's some people that it's my visual of it is like they're standing on the side of the road and, your next great podcast guest, or, we'll podcast guest for food. They'll go on anywhere at any time. And I was guilty of this. Early on, 2016, I wrote to the Guinness Book of World Records and said, I want the record for being the most interviewed person on podcasts. Well, it was so early, they like, that record doesn't even exist. And I am so glad that I didn't get it, because more is not better. Better is better. And if you're seen on podcasts that aren't consistent with your brand, if they're not something that you're proud of, it can actually hurt you. And we talk this a lot about our clients, right? Imagine that you're a high-level consultant, right? And you've got the deal. All of a sudden, somebody in the food chain Googles your name, and your last podcast interview pops up. And it's, it's a Wayne's World podcast, right? Two guys in their mom's basement. That can kill a deal faster than anything. So more is not better. Better is better. The next thing, that a myth that people talk about, is bigger is better, right? They want to be on bigger podcasts. And I've seen some people come in and their first podcast, it's like, what podcast do you want? I want Joe Rogan. Do you think you're ready for that? Right? From the standpoint of Broadway musicals and theater, right? They start off Broadway. They start to get it down. They start to master it before they get in front of that big stage. The other thing too is most of these podcasts you've got one shot at, right? And think about it from the old days with Oprah. Would you want to be on Oprah the year before your book and your product launched? Probably not, right? You want to be there at the right time. The other thing too is bigger is not better, right? There's more fish in the ocean than there are in a barrel, right? But if you're going for this type of fish, you'd rather just go up to that basket and take that fish than you would spending all that time out there in the ocean, right? And I learned this early on. I was on a podcast one time, and it was I think they had about 40,000 downloads, biggest one I had ever been on. It was more of an ego thing, right? It wasn't my ideal audience. From those 40,000, I probably got 10 leads from it. Shortly after that, talking about the same thing, I was on another podcast. It was my ideal audience. And this is back before the days we had data. And the host told me, she said, I've got about 150 downloads per episode. And I thought, well, I know it's a great podcast. I know this is my ideal audience. I went on there and got 100 leads from 150 downloads, right? Bigger is not better. Better is better. And today, the third myth that I really want to talk about, let's jump back. I missed a slide here. What is bigger, right? If you look at the numbers, Libsyn puts this out in December. This last year, they didn't. The top 1% of podcasts get 33 downloads per episode in the first 30 days. The top 20% get about 1,000 in the first 30 days. Average podcast is right around 135. So when you're talking about bigger, I'd ask you to think about if you were talking in front of a room, right? How many people have actually talked in front of 1,000 or 10,000 people? And 70% of podcast listeners listen to the entire thing. So really, you're getting a lot of good time and impressions there. So the third thing that is hurting your results, and this is what we're going to talk about the most today, it's the host that promotes the interview. Well, the host does promote the interview, and they should. If they're not, you shouldn't be a guest. But you know what? If you don't promote it too, they're probably not going to invite you to be a guest. You see, we've worked with clients before where they had done podcast guesting on their own or with another agency, and then they came to us for their second round, and we reached out to the podcasters, and they're like, yeah, we don't want them back. They didn't promote anything last time. These people shut off an entire channel, right? If you want to open up a channel, tell the host that you're committed to promoting this. Now, this is something we had felt, we had heard, and then this year at Podcast Movement, we did a promotion, and we said that, yeah, all of our clients are committed to collaborative promotion, right? If you're a client with Interview Valet, you've got to say, yeah, I'm going to promote the interview. And we started to put it right there on the one sheets, right? Here's Scott Reeb, great lawyer. Well, when the host knows that you're going to promote the interview, they are much more likely to say yes to you. It opens up an entire different area. But the question then becomes, well, all right, if not promoting is hurting me, when should I promote? Well, there's really some different times that you can promote, right? And the first one is before it even goes live, right? So after you've recorded, put out there, pre-launch. I was just interviewed on this. I'm so excited for this to go live. Had a great interview, right? Tease that this interview is coming out. Then there's that first 30 days. Studies say that 80% of a podcast listens typically come within the first 30 days. So if the podcast launches on the first of the month, don't think that I don't have to promote this. It's already the 6th of the month. No, they're still going to be out there looking at it. So make sure that you're out there. And now with technology, it's so easy to put posts on repost, right? So after that first 30 days, you can start to have a cycle and say every Tuesday, I promote an old podcast. So if you're doing a campaign of a dozen podcasts, well, they're going to start reposting. What would that be? Every 3 months. That won't wear your list out, but it'll keep you top of mind and give you great content to use. Now, Sam had put something about your ideal audience. And this is such a good tie-in here because people will say, you have to be everywhere, right? I disagree with that. I think you have to be everywhere your ideal clients are. And let me give you an example of this. When my youngest daughter, this was a number of years ago, she was in middle school, Instagram was just taking off. And Emily came in and she's like, Dad, you need to be on Instagram. I'm like, well, why? She says, because everybody's there. I said, well, who do you define as everybody? And she said, me and all my friends. Well, clearly they were not my ideal audience. And it probably would have been a little bit creepy if I was there. So only go where your ideal customers are, right? So for me, I've got a big presence on LinkedIn. That's where I'm comfortable. You don't see me on TikTok or Clubhouse or any of those. Now, different people in our team might be there, but I would ask you to think, where are my clients? And that's where I need to be. The other thing too is when you're posting, make sure you tag the host, right? There's an old joke about how do you sell newspapers in a small town? Put everybody's name in it and everybody will buy a copy and their mom will buy 5, right? So the same thing in your post there. If you put the host's name in there, it's a way of thanking them, of giving back, of giving them some a shout out, but it also taps into their audience. So if there's people that you mentioned during the podcast, right? A book that you mentioned, somebody you quoted, make sure you mention that in there too. It really gets that out into more ways. So that's more of the strategic. Now let's get down into the tactical. And this guide that Tiffany put together here for the second year is just packed full of tactical ideas. So 10 creative ways to promote your podcast interviews. Okay. First one is the podcast artwork, right? Remember when you used to see as seen on television on everything, or as seen in the Wall Street Journal or NBC News, whatever it is, whatever had value to your audience, well, start using that now, right? On your LinkedIn profile, in your one sheet, on your website, put as seen on these podcasts, right? It's that affiliation that you can get with there. And you can just grab the graphics pretty much. Sam put in there, but you can just right click most of the time and pull that artwork down. It's only at 250 by 250, but people are starting to recognize podcasts a lot more, right? I'm amazed on the news as they're introducing people and they're the host of this podcast. It's like, heck, when we started, people would go, what's a podcast? So don't forget, take that artwork, put it over your website or wherever your customers are. Another thing you can do is pull quote images, right? If I babble for 40 minutes, my team can find 2 sentences of brilliance in there. And it's easy enough to get the transcript and just pull out 1 or 2 quotes and put those up on images. You'll find often the podcast host does this, and you can do it also. Maybe quote the podcast host. Now they're going to share that with their audience, right? And it's not one of these infomercials or the memes, right? The meme that I post about myself on my social media, and it's my quote. No, you can quote the podcast, so it's not, it's not like you're self-promoting as much, but people will know, wow, I'll go check out the rest of that podcast. And maybe they don't have time to listen to the entire podcast. There's something called audiograms, and most people have seen them, but they weren't sure what they were called or how to make them. It's basically you take a short snippet of the podcast. It could either be a video podcast or an audio podcast. You drop that in, you put some B-roll footage behind it. Maybe you put a static image on it. You see the little waveform that goes there, that so you can see that it's actually speaking or there's audio to it. What a great way to pull out 60 seconds of brilliance, something that's very important in there. And it also engages, right? If somebody clicks play, chances are they're going to stick around for that 45 or 60 seconds to actually hear it. So now even people that don't listen to podcasts will get to listen to your best of. And speaking of best of, you can take all of your little snippets and put them up on a page on your website, right? It's almost like frequently asked questions. We've got one of these up there. It's interviewvalet.com / I can never remember. It's either tips or tip. I can't remember if it's singular or plural, but they're just little video segments, right? So you can take those video snippets and put it up on your website. We had one client, he was the CEO of the company, and the content people said, hey, can you answer all these frequently asked questions? And he finally said, no, I've answered them all on podcasts. And they were able to go back, pull the video snippets from when he was asking the question. So in their FAQs, they've got the founder answering the question, right? And they've got the transcript right below it, right? And it's not just him sitting in front of the camera answering one after the other. It really looks like, wow, he's in demand. He's talking on all the different ones there. And once again, that didn't take a minute more of his time. He just said, here's my podcast interviews. Now, there's some talk whether or not blogs will be killed by ChatGPT. Time will tell on that. But up to this point, blogs are still powerful, right? Search engines love blogs, especially the content there. For me, writing is tough, right? IR engineer. So for me, writing a blog is a homework assignment, but talking is easy. And I can take a podcast appearance and take a transcript and rewrite that transcript to make a blog out of it. If I don't do it, I could hire someone to do that. One of the things that we've done in the past is get a journalism intern, right? These are smart people looking for experience. They're great on listening to a story and writing an article about it. They're hoping to write newspaper articles or for the stations, but chances are, blogs give them a lot of practice with that. So if you've got a university near you, or if you even got ones that are remote, writing blogs from your past podcast experience is amazing, especially if you've got a dozen that you did last year. You could probably get 36 blogs out of that content, and you don't have to do anything more in that. This is one that that a client taught me. Alaric Heck, if you've ever hit his website, you probably know who he is. He's like the king of YouTube ads and also of retargeting. But he built his business on a lot of podcast interviews. And what he did is he took a sizzle reel. He took it back to his team, and he's got lots of video editors there, and they cut it up and sort of took the best of from all of his different interviews, and didn't take him any more time. And boy, it made it look like he was in demand everywhere, right? And they just sort of chopped it up. Now, his is a little bit long. I think it's about 10 minutes. But when you think about a speaker's reel, sometimes if you're trying to speak at an event, You'll give them that speaker's reel. You can do the same thing with podcasts and make it a podcast sizzle reel. Very, very powerful thing to do. And once again, it can be outsourced. I'm amazed on number 7. How many people don't take their appearances and put them on their website, right? If you had the chance to talk at this place and interviewed by this person, why wouldn't you want to add that to your website? Because it's not you talking about it. It's someone else talking about you. So there's a great way to have a page, almost like a media page, right? Maybe interview valet in the media. You could put the blogs there. You could put the sizzle reel. You could put all of your content in there, and people can just go through. You'd put your press releases, your educational things, all there. So make sure you put your podcast interviews. And James had asked about how long should a sizzle reel be? I don't know. That's one of those things. How long should a rope be? Just long enough, right? I would think 3 to 5 minutes, right? Beyond that, it's going to start going down. And you can always test, right? You can see the analytics, what people do best, but it's not supposed to be listening to your entire speech, your entire podcast, but just to get a sense of, wow, James is a good speaker. He's really engaging. He's funny, and I can see him talking to different people on different subjects. That's the whole idea behind it. And as you get more content, it may get a little longer, right? If you've only got a half dozen podcasts so far, especially if, say, a half dozen have video, all right, maybe that's a 2-minute or a 3-minute. As you get more and more, you can always update that. And you could even update that focused on what you want to talk about, right? This is my sizzle reel, Tom talking about entrepreneurship. This is Tom talking about, podcast interview marketing. This is Tom talking about, running a remote team, things like that. So breaking that up. And yes, Adam, thank you for putting that in there. Adam does blogs too. There are great ones out there. And I think that's going to be a difference. And we'll talk a little bit about this. Content's getting easier and easier and easier to create, but it doesn't mean that it's good content. It's the same thing with podcasts, right? The world doesn't need another podcast. It needs another great podcast. So another one, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft, and they are pumping a ton of money into LinkedIn, right? It's a great place to put articles, to tap into the audience, especially if you're selling to a higher level, more sophisticated audience, maybe one that's more professional, right? As TikTok has gone more younger, as Instagram has gone more to a younger audience. If you're selling relationship sales based on high lifetime value, coaches, consultants, B2B sales, somewhere where they really need to know you, often people will go to LinkedIn. And if you don't believe that, just Google anybody's name. I don't care who they are. LinkedIn is usually in the top 3 of the search engines right there. So if people are clicking there, make sure they're not just seeing your profile, but also some articles. And, articles of you being interviewed in a podcast, boom, instant credibility. The other thing is industry articles, right? Every industry has their journal. And you want to talk about micro focusing, right? If you can get an industry article from one of your interviews, what a great way to reach people that don't even listen to podcasts, right? They're going to be influenced by that. And I've been amazed how they are starving for content, right? The first time we tried this, I thought, wow, I must have to know somebody who knows somebody. And we reached out to Podcast Business Journal and had this professionally written article. Everything looked good on it. And I submitted it for review. And I thought, okay, it's going to go in front of an editorial board. They'll ask for changes and everything like that. This was on a Friday afternoon. I sent it. They told me by late Friday afternoon that it would be the key story on the Monday morning edition that went out there. So great way to target different groups, different customers that are listening to you. And number 10, if you've ever gotten an email from anybody at Interview Valet, if you scroll down to the bottom, you see this. We use a program called Wise Stamp. It's a signature block, and below everybody's signature, there's a place where you can promote a podcast interview, you can promote a video, you can promote an upcoming event. And what's great about this is that Tiffany runs it, right? The magic happens. A couple times a week, she'll change it, right? So we've got the LinkedIn Live coming up. A few days before that, boom, everybody's email signature has that. If there's a podcast that I was on and we're promoting that for a few days, boom, everybody's signature gets that. She can even do it so sales gets one signature, people reaching out to podcasters. About a third of our team is podcast relationship managers. They've got that one-on-one relationship there. About a third of the 30 people are client account managers. So maybe they've got something different at the bottom of theirs. A very easy and scalable way to get content out there. I mean, think about how many emails you send a day, or step back and think how many your team sends. I should actually, it's the email manager thing is called Wise Stamp, WISE stamp.com. They've got it for personal and for companies. I should do this study sometime and figure out how many emails we just send a day, right? Think about it. If low end, if we send 100 emails a day with 30 people, even I can do that math. That's 3,000 impressions a day. And by changing that around, people get used to things. So if you start changing the bottom of it around, you'll get more engagement with that. So there are the 10 things that we went through and we've seen clients doing in order to get great results in repurposing and promoting their interviews. Now, before we jump into questions here, there's something that's come up in the last, I think it's 38 days now. At least I've known about it for 38 days. And I keep going back and forth between, I don't know if I'm scared to death or excited about it. And just put in the chat, have you played around with Chat GPT or any of the AIs in there? If you haven't, I did a video, and I'll have Tiffany, can you put that link to the video in there? I did a video and it was amazing. I was playing around with it. And I recorded live of me playing on Chat GPT for 27 minutes. Here's what I did in 27 minutes. And you can see how it goes in there. And I was going to do a LinkedIn Live with it, but Chat GPT, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it goes down, which it did in the middle of the video. And there was no way I was doing it at that live. So I just hit record. And I started off with my podcast guest hat on. And I said, shoot, I need to do a one sheet, right? So write a biography up for Tom Schwab, founder of Interview Valet. Boom. Came down. The bio was actually pretty good. All right. Better than I could have written, especially in that time. Then I asked it, well, how would I tell the host or suggest them for suggested introduction? Asked that question. Boom. Got a suggested introduction. Asked it, what are, 5 or 6 discussion topics that I could talk about on there? Boom, those came back. And I said, punch those up a little bit. Make it sound like a title of something. It came back with that. So in the matter of about 4 or 5 minutes, I got a good start on a one sheet. And that's something, that one sheet that you need in order to reach out to podcasters. And we've done a whole webinar on this before, on the keys to an ideal one sheet. So then I thought, well, now let's start reaching out, right? Let's start identifying shows. So I went in there and said, okay, what shows would be ideal for me? Why would they be ideal for me? And of the 10 shows it put up there, I think there were 2 that I hadn't thought of. There was about 5 or 6 that I had been on, and the other ones were great too. So it's like, wow, you can use that a little bit for the prospecting side of it. And I knew there was one podcast I'd been on, and I wanted to see how it would work for this. So I said, I want to be on Follow Your Different with Christopher Lochhead. If you don't know Christopher, that book, like I said, Play Bigger, is foundational in our business. It's all about category design. And so I said, I want to be on his podcast, write a pitch, right? We don't use the word pitch. We introduce, but I figured AI may not understand that. So I said, write a pitch for why I would be a great guest to him. Boom, it came back. Now, I wouldn't have wanted it to go out, right? It did some things that were very, very common that we don't do, but I guarantee you that introduction was probably better than 80% of those that he sees, right? It was a lot more customized. So now I'm probably, I don't know, 10 minutes into this experiment, and you can watch it here. And then I put my podcast host hat on, right? If I was Christopher Lochhead, assume that I'm the host now. What questions could I ask Tom Schwab? Then drill down deeper. Which ones, haven't been asked before? So it got that. Now, I've been on a show before, so I took the audio recording and I transcribed it. We use an account called Fireflies AI, and got the transcript, dropped it in there, and said, hey, write show notes. Gave decent show notes for that. I said, find, 10 great quotes that I could use in a meme. Got those. It said, what was another one? Write a blog based on this. Got a decent blog. I wouldn't put that up, but it was a start point, right? And that worked well there. And then at the end, I'm like, oh, let's see how much personality it has. I said, write a thank you note that I'll hand write to the host, thanking them, right? Let's use technology in order to go old school, right? Nobody remembers an email, but everybody remembers a handwritten note, even if they can't read my handwriting. It did all of that. And that was all in 28 minutes. So we're excited. We're looking at different ways that we can use technology. One of our core values is that in this digital age of automation, it's the personal touch that makes the difference. Technology should enhance us, not replace us. The other thing too is a core value of Interview Valet is that our only true advantage is our ability to quickly evolve and execute. So that's my experience with ChatGPT. I'm 34 days into it. I'm sure we're going to all learn more on this. So check that out. And I'm going to bring Tiffany back on. I'm going to stop the slides here and let's open it up for some questions here.
Hey, Tom, that was great. I've been monitoring the chat as we've been going along. A lot of interaction. The chat GPT really got everyone sparked up there. But going back earlier in the presentation, James asked a couple questions about as far as like sizzle reels and different things. And I know one of them you kind of answered already is the ideal length for a sizzle reel. I know kind of shorter is a little better. You don't want it too long, right? I think you said a couple minutes there?
I'd say a couple minutes. And I apologize if you asked a question, I get like squirrel, right? If I start reading your question, I will stop talking. So I tried grabbing some of those, but I think about what you're trying to do with each piece of content, right? So a sizzle reel, you're not trying to get somebody to understand your entire life story, right? While we're producing it on a desktop, somebody's probably watching it on their phone, right? I think we have somebody said we've got the attention span of a goldfish now, or maybe less than a goldfish. So keep it short, keep it snappy there. All the rest of that. I think for a sizzle reel, sometimes less is more. And they can, and especially if the goal is just, hey, I want to see that James can speak, that he's engaging, that he's a great guest. Just give them enough stuff in order to them to say yes, right? One of the things that we see a lot is, by and large, podcasts aren't trained journalists, right? So you've got PR companies that reach out to them and they give them a 10-page media kit, right? The podcast host is looking at to them on their phone, and it's like, there's 9 pages of stuff to say no to, right? If they want more, if they want the media kit, they'll ask for it. But the one sheet, the idea is just boil it down, make it easy for them to say yes.
Right. And again, it all goes back to keeping your audience in mind, your reader, your viewer in mind. So you may even have a couple sizzle reels, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of depending on its individual purpose. And as you do more interviews and you do more different things, they can change, they can evolve into, highlighting, oh, that was a really great point. It's about keeping the viewer in mind and the format that it's going to be viewed in. Another question that James asked, kind of tacking onto that, was, can sizzle reels be audio only? I kind of hopped in the chat and I told him, I think so. A way to maybe keep it visually dynamic would be for each audio clip to change the background. Mm-hmm. So if you're pulling a clip from an interview that you've done or a speaking engagement, maybe that background can be that podcast artwork, or, that a picture of you and that host or that interviewer or that stage. Again, in that way, if they're actually viewing it, not just listening, it keeps it visually engaging to keep them watching.
Yeah, and it's so easy to throw some B-roll footage on the back or different pictures of you or the podcast. All right. Here's behind the curtain. Tiffany has been working the last few months on the updated Interview Valet website. And when it comes out, it's going to look amazing. Looks amazing now. But one of the things she did was she went into Spotify and made a playlist. And it's not all 1,200 of my interviews, but there's probably a dozen different key interviews. And she put those all in one place. So if somebody wants to come in there and just listen to some of those, they can find them all right there. And it's a little bit curated, right? So it's sort of the best of. So just think of what you're trying to do at each stage with that.
Right. And if you're going through a different promotion, maybe you're promoting something big, an event launch, a product launch, something like that, you can go adjust that and alter that again to match your messaging of where you're at in that stage. Again, we had some questions on different resources. James just asked again here, how to produce a transcript of an interview.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of different ways now. Some of them, we use fireflies.ai, Otter. I think that's otter.ai does it. Descript does it. There's still a company out there called rev.com that does it. I think it's for $1 a minute, and one that's Temi, Temi, which is 25 cents a minute. And I'm amazed. When we first started out, Tiffany, 9 years ago, we used to pay $1 a minute for a transcript. And we were so happy because, they got it back to us within like 2 hours. And we thought we were getting such a great deal, right? That was cutting edge at that time. And now to look at it, you can go to even something like YouTube, right? They'll do the transcripts for it. So if you load a video in there, it'll give you the transcript right there. For me, that's just too many steps and everything like that, but there's a lot of great ways to do that. Descript is a great one. For audiograms, it's amazing some of the things they're doing there. And I think a lot of those, Tiffany, are in the guide, sort of Tom's toolbox at the end. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you different ones we've seen and then put a little star next to it and say, hey, this is the one we use. Not sure if it's the best or not, but it sure works well in our workflow.
Yes, I was going to point that out. If you haven't downloaded the guide yet, the last page is a full page of resources. And like Tom said, we have an asterisk by the ones that we use ourselves here at Interview Valet. Again, and it's a lot of using our 10,000 hours, right? Our trial and error of what has worked most efficiently, what makes the most sense for us. Yeah, a lot of questions about how to generate these different things. Audiograms we use Headliner. There's a few others, Wave. There was a new one, Tom, that we found recently, Snap.
Snap Video is
Yes.
another one that seems very interesting on how you can do that. And I think I was just looking at the comments here. Sam had said something about Jasper versus Chat GPT. I think we're going to see so many different interfaces popping up here because what's today, January 18th. Yesterday, Chat GPT just announced that they're going to open up their API so everybody can use it. Right now, granted, you're going to have to pay a little bit for it, but I think we're just going to have an explosion of different portals that people can use that for. And I think it's probably, well, I think my sense is that it's all using that same master brain here. So it's probably the interface that's going to be the best one. I've tried Jasper also, and I love some of the things they're doing there, and also the education they're putting out. Right? It's like we've got this shiny new tool, nobody knows how to use it. So if companies are helping us to use that, that makes it more valuable.
Right. I know our first discussion about Chat GPT, I was just watching in amazement. It blew my mind that it's capable of that. And yeah, the other platform's now going to do that. It's going to be like a tech rush right over here to the new shiny object, the new toy that everybody's going to start playing with. See, one more thing. Another thing, Sam kind of commented about the blogs, and how that's going to change, how resources like Chat GPT are going to change the blog, world. Is it going to take away? And that's something that we're always working to monitor and gauge. And so I'm already thinking ahead of, next year when we release the ultimate guide for 2024. Will blogs be on that list? We'll have to stay tuned and see.
Yeah, I've had this conversation. It's going to be interesting as content becomes easier to create. And by content, I mean written content, pictures, things like that. Will it become generic and watered down? And, if I can do 100 blogs in the time that used to take me one to do one, will it just become noise? Right. And will people stop doing that? And they'll wonder if Tom Schwab wrote that or Tom Schwab had, Chat GPT write it. So as that becomes more generic, will audio and video become more powerful? Because it's a human, right? With my ums and uhs, there's no computer right now that could be as quirky as I am. So will that audio be more authentic, or will that video? And who knows, by this guide 2030, maybe there's better looking avatars than me that will be doing it, and they'll figure out the words, the sound, and everything. You'll know because there won't be all the ums.
Exactly. Yeah, all this. And the one other resource we talked about was the email signatures. I actually just saw an article the other day and I think it listed why stamps specifically. It's a handy marketing tool of 2023. I know we enjoy it. It's a great way to use that real estate. Like you said, if you think about how many emails your company or you send in a week, and it stays at the bottom of that thread. So if you have a thread that's ongoing for weeks and weeks, they might see, your promotion from 2 months ago when it's relevant and has meaning to them, right? It's always kind of there. So it's a great tool. And again, our resources for that are listed in the guide here attached to today's topic. Let's see. Oh, James asked a good question. Is there a way to discern whether ChatGPT wrote something?
Supposedly there is, right? And that's the big thing with students now. You know, if you do you have to read War and Peace to do the book report on it? Or do you just go into ChatGPT and ask, write an 8th grade book report on War and Peace? Supposedly there is stuff that can tell you whether or not it was written by it. But I think it's always going to be a cat and mouse game, right? It's like cybersecurity. Just as soon as this gets good, then this one gets a little bit better. And maybe there's a place for that in academia. But I think in blogs, you know, is everybody going to double check to make sure that's good? Who knows? Maybe Google will do it with the search engines and the results and stuff like that. Or an email, you know, right now I can sort of, you know, tell if it's a canned email by the fonts being different, things like that. And my team knows that if they get an email from me and there's not a typo in it, or I sign it as Thomas, then it's purely a phishing thing. So I think there's still a place for humans, and I'm excited what we can do with this new technology.
Me too. And like you said, technology should not replace us. It should be as a tool to make us better, to improve us. And so, yeah, we shall see. It's a new thing. So we're going to see the direction that it's taking.
And we're learning from each other on this too. You know, we're 9 years in now. This year, the guide is so much better than last year because we got all that feedback. We've learned from our clients, always improving that. And even in what we're doing, right? 9 years ago, there were no databases. It was hunt and peck through iTunes, right? Now we've got our own database. We license other databases and pull those in. So, and then we also learn from clients, what's working with them, right? I'd never thought of the sizzle reel till Alaric said, hey, look what my team did. And it's like, oh, we got to start doing that. We got to tell other people about that. And I think that's a benefit from working with somebody that has that 10,000 hours of experience, because they're learning different things, right? They've got that expertise in there. I don't want to go to a doctor that it's the first time they've ever seen this, right? I want to go to the doctor that says, oh yeah, I see this all the time. This is what works.
Right. When you go to the doctor, right, and they're like, what does everybody else do? Because, you're in there in that private moment and you don't know what to expect or what, is this normal? Is this okay? And, like you said, I've seen this 100 times. You're going to be fine. Here's how to overcome. That's great. And talking about the data, I teased this in the beginning a little bit. This topic is our second most requested resource and valuable resource. And it is second only to our number one, the State of Podcast Guesting annual report that we release every February, and which is right around the corner. And we're excited to release that. And we're working on putting all the finishing touches on that now. And we're going to be back here next month for you to present those numbers, Tom.
That's going to be exciting. We've done this now since 2017. We've got the largest database in podcast guesting. So we're able to tell you, the mean time between sending an introduction and getting the yes is this amount. Don't worry about following up after this point because it's not going to help, right? What's the mean time between invitation and recording going live? What percentage are video? What percentage are live? What's the most popular ways to record podcasts? We've got all of that data and more, and we're really excited to share that with the community.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. And knowing those numbers, right, helps you gauge your marketing plan, right? If I have a book coming out this summer, okay, back up 3XY, days, weeks, months, to plan that and plan accordingly so that those things line up and especially video and showing up, that more and more podcasts are moving toward that. So it's always great to know the numbers, right?
I think of one of our clients, Scott, came to me and he says, before I was podcast guessing because I had no idea the data or the process. And he says, now I'm podcast guesting. So we'll share that data with everyone.
Yeah. And we have the web pages up. I'm going to put that over in the chat. Like I said, the report isn't released yet. It should be out in the next couple weeks. But I'm going to put that over in the chat for you to, you can sign up for the wait list for the report. And we will actually be coming back to you live here on LinkedIn next month, Wednesday, February 15th at the same time, 1 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to talk about, go beyond the data and what the numbers really mean. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you again next month. Thank you.